Hi, everybody. Today's special guest is Addison, also known as Ali. Ali, how are you doing?
I'm very well, thanks, Graham. How are you?
Fab, mate. Do you want to just tell everybody about, where you're currently working, what sport you're involved in, and how you actually managed to get there?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a hockey coach. As you know, I worked with you up at Durham for a while. Currently, I am head of hockey at Ipswich School and have been here for about 2 years, or just over 2 years now. And I'm currently the England under-18 boys head coach.
Fab. Originally from Australia?
Yeah. From a state called Tasmania in Australia. So quite often we get confused with being our own country and disassociated from Australia. But yeah, from an island off the bottom of basically Melbourne, an hour's flight off the bottom of Melbourne. So little old Tassie with 500,000 people.
Okay, really interesting to know in terms of what the culture is like there from a sporting context in relationship to what it's like over here.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably the cliche image that you think of when you think of Australia is we are pretty sports mad. Yeah, a lot of our life revolves around being involved in sport. You know, it was compulsory in school. You had to do a summer and a winter sport. I think, I don't know, it is a real cultural thing, and it's kind of, I guess at surface level, it's something about Australian people. I think the weather probably has something to do with it. The fact that it's a bit warmer and a bit nicer. So people tend to want to be outside and want to be active. So I definitely think that's a part of it. Whereas in the UK, probably Europe in general, I guess it's probably a little bit colder. And so you tend to socialise indoors a bit, which tends to revolve around a tap and a bar. But yeah, I guess there's probably that cultural element of it. The environment probably shapes it a little bit. I think in general, it's probably a little bit stereotypical, but I think the general attitude in Australia is that we'll just have a go. We'll have a crack and we'll see what happens. And, we're kind of prepared to roll the dice a bit. And, if I look at where I am now, it's basically been a whole bunch of me rolling the dice and having a go and seeing where the journey takes me to kind of end up where I've ended up.
Yeah, I certainly think, and with Australians, all the Australians that I've known over the years and played doubles with a few in my early days as a tennis player, and the fear of failure doesn't seem to come in as much as it does necessarily in this country sometimes. Rolling the dice and having a go and giving it your best and seeing things as maybe an opportunity to learn, grow, and win, instead of actually, no, I'm too frightened to lose. Seems to be slightly different. Would you say that's true?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, for sure. Winning is probably a big thing in Australia. You make a big deal out of it. We have all our sport has a grand final, so you play finals. So, you can win your games throughout the season, but it's actually how you perform in a big game that actually matters. You can't just be the most consistent team all year and get the title. You've got to get yourself into finals position, and then you've got to perform when it counts. So a lot of our stuff is about performing under pressure. I think from a hockey perspective, we tend to play out of local centres. So very different to here where it's home and away and each club has their own home ground. Where I grew up, we had 6 clubs all playing out of the same complex, a 3-pitch complex, probably a bit like Lee Valley sort of a setup. And because of that, you're playing in front of crowds all the time. My grand finals when I was a bit younger for senior club, you'd have 2,000-3,000 people there hanging over the fence. And that's kind of, I don't know, I loved that. I really enjoyed that. It's probably a need to show off a little bit, I don't know, but it's kind of, I like being in the middle of that environment where everyone's looking at you and you've got to perform. And I think that probably adds to that aspect of wanting to succeed. But yeah, I think in general, as I said, Australians want to have a crack. They want to try and win.
We're very similar in terms of personality traits, and we've both done psychometric assessments. And
I think we're actually identical, apart from you're more compliant than I am.
Yeah, maybe that's just an age thing. Maybe if I took it when I was your age, it might be slightly different. But What intrigues me about that whole concept is the analogy that you just gave. I could literally lose to my grandmother on a tennis court in the park where nobody's watching at all.
Oh, same.
But then literally you stick us on a court at Wimbledon or, in the States at university in front of a couple of thousand people watching. And I might not win, but I'll be the best that I've ever been because I love that.
Oh, mate, I was the same. So I used to get bored in the regular season because there wasn't a crowd. You were playing the same. So there was only 6 clubs, so you play each club 4 times. There wasn't a crowd. Usually by halfway through the season, you knew if you're in the top 4 or not. And if you're in the 4, you're in the finals. Yeah. Or you knew you had a pretty good chance. So I used to get pretty bored with that sort of routine, and that probably comes down to having very low compliance. But I get quite bored in that, and I could go I guess you'd call a penalty corner specialist, but I'd never be anywhere near the top goal scorers throughout the league. Yeah. But for my club, I think I'm one of the highest goal scorers in finals, because when the adrenaline's pumping and when it means something and when it's like everything's on the line, that's kind of when I tend to step up a bit. I'm actually pretty rubbish without pressure. I kind of need a little bit of pressure, and there's everyone has their limits of what you can cope with. Yeah. So I'm not saying that it never gets too much or anything like that, but I generally need a little bit of pressure just to kick me off and kickstart me.
All right. So
I know the boys always used to say, like, I'd walk into the change rooms for finals and they'd go, "Oh, Ali's finals, Ali is here." Because I literally was a different person. I'd walk into the change rooms and I'd be like, "Right, let me at it. Let's go."
So before we go back to why you chose hockey then, because I want to hold that thought for a second. I want to know that as a coach, knowing what you know now, and I've seen you do this, so I actually know the answer a little bit, but maybe not everybody else knows this answer. How do you then motivate a player in your team who's very much like you, who's playing in a match against a team who are nowhere near as good as you guys, and you're already 3-4-0 up? How do you continue to motivate that person to adhere to the culture, adhere to the values of the team, and also to instill them to push themselves into being a better player?
Yeah, really interesting one, that one. And I don't know if I have got it. Well, I don't think you get anything 100% right all the time. I don't think I necessarily have mastered it. I kind of know now. I know what my personality is, and so I was always like that, but I never understood it. And it probably wasn't until I got to Durham and we started doing that work that I started looking into it a lot more and really starting to understand it. So I know what happens to me when there's a bit of pressure. So my dominance or my competitiveness comes up a little bit, and my kind of creativity and I guess liking to be liked and all that kind of thing drops a little bit. So I become a bit more outcome focused and a bit more driven. So for me, I always found that I would have to create pressurized scenarios, and that would be what would kick me on. So I would generally just try and create a bit of pressure for that person, rather than relax it, because I know if I'm relaxed, then if I'm too relaxed, then I'm not going to go for it. So for that kind of person, a person like me, I guess if I look back on old me or younger me, I wish I had someone who was putting pressure on me consistently in the league itself, even when we're playing the teams that we know we're going to spank, because that would have got the best out of me. So yeah, that's kind of the approach that I take with people like that. I think for you have other people as well who are quite opinionated and quite like, they want to always prove you wrong. So I tend to play mind games with those kind of people, and I would challenge, if I wanted them to do A, I would kind of challenge them with B, knowing that their reaction would be A. So little things like that. But, it's still a process that I think, whilst we can talk about the very basis of a personality type, I think there's so much detail in it. I haven't even scratched the surface of that. If I was to pigeonhole someone as the same personality as me, generalistically, there is so much more in that person that is so different to who I am, that, you know, so much of about it is knowing the individual themselves, not actually, you know, the personality type is a great overview.
It's a good start.
It gives you some really good understanding of an overview of what they're like, but actually it's their story and their history and what's happened in their life and how they've got to where they are. And it's kind of, that's why getting to know them is so important, and knowing what makes them tick. Because until
me and you on a graph are very similar. Me and you off the graph are also very different as well. And that's what makes, I think, coaching such a hard thing to do really well, because you literally need to know everybody in order to motivate them to be as good as they can be. It's really interesting, Ali, is I just spoke to this week, spoke to Dan Keenan, who was UK #1 tennis player who played at Wimbledon. And he was saying that he went to the States in 1998, university in the States. And he was saying then, you know, he wished that he'd had somebody who could talk to them about the psychology and his personality traits and his strengths and his weaknesses and his limitations. I went to the States in 1988, and I was saying the same thing. And you're saying the same thing. Ali Dixon, who's a marathon runner who went to the Olympics, we've all said the same thing. Now, if there's any younger player who wants to excel in the world of sport, just happens to come across this series of videos and starts watching them, then hopefully they'll start to get to the fact that actually the psychology side of things is the thing that's going to really enhance their performance pretty quickly. The more they understand themselves, the more they understand their intrinsic motivations, the more they understand why they're doing it, the more it'll allow them to relieve some of the pressures and anxieties and stresses, because maybe they're not real. Maybe they've just created a narrative in their own head, or it's come from the parents, and they're able to understand the processes in order to start performing better.
Oh, 100%. And I think if you look at development holistically as well, like I would say I really got excited about this sort of stuff, like consciously excited about it maybe 4 or 5 years ago. Really intrigued by it. And, you know, I think if I think about that and I go, okay, that was me at 31, 31 around there. Well, imagine if I'd started that when I was 5. So imagine if I went to school and the first thing I did at the start of the day in my tutor group, or whatever you call it, was I learned how to breathe properly, or I learned how to meditate, or I learned how to switch off. Then the science behind that is, okay, so first thing in the morning, I put myself in the optimum state as a 5-year-old.
Yeah.
Then because of that, I open up the thinking logical part of my brain, which then means I can receive information better, which means I'm going to learn better, which means I'm going to have better self-control. And actually my capacity to learn and develop is heightened by so much more. So if you're learning that as a 5-year-old kid versus, you know, a 35-year-old, essentially I'm undoing 30 years worth of whatever. And I just think that sports psychology is all generally, I think it's getting better, but I think it's seen as a Band-Aid. Whereas if you look at S&C is preventative. We get fit and we get strong and we get robust so we don't get injured. Skills, we build our skills from a young age. Why? So we can perform. But we don't really approach S&C until there's a problem. Whereas all the other things are about prevention, and sports psych is a cure. And I just think if it was treated with the same importance as we treat being strong and being robust and everything else, well, the ceiling that's put on yourself, or that you put on yourself, just gets lifted that much higher.
I think some of that is psychology's fault as well. So up until maybe early 2000s, psychology has always been about, or always had the, I guess the thought process of, we need to fix somebody. There's something wrong, we need to fix them. And
so it's like self-perpetuating kind of cycle.
Absolutely. And sports psychology hasn't really grown as an industry until, you know, maybe around about the 90s, 2000s a little bit. But post 2000, when positive psychology came in a little bit, then we started to have a look at the fact that, very similar to coaching in terms of my world, is that you take somebody's ability for what they've got and you improve it. And you give them a strategy for them to either improve it mentally, or you give them a technique to improve them technically, or you give them some bigger weights to improve them physically. So it's always about improving. Psychology pre-2000s was always about fixing a problem. I think psychology post-2000 has always been about enhancing people. And I can't argue with you. I think if you can build strategies and interventions first before it goes wrong, then actually it will go wrong, by the way. It'll still go wrong, but it'll be a little dip instead of...
Yeah. No, I was reading some really cool stuff. When was it, a couple of weeks ago, about being a Buddhist monk, and this guy was talking about when he went into a monastery, there was a kid teaching kids, and they were all sitting down. They're like 5 years old, something like that, and they're all sitting down, and they're all they're just breathing, and he's teaching them to breathe. And he was like, "Oh, what are you doing? What are you teaching them?" And he said, "Oh, I'm teaching them to breathe." He's like, "Well, what? You know, this is school. Why are you teaching them to breathe? Why aren't you teaching them maths or anything?" He's like, "Well, breathing is the foundation of life. It's the foundation of everything you do. So it's the most important thing that you need to learn first, and then you can learn all the other stuff." And it is so true. Like, and you know, obviously we can probably get into this in a bit more depth, but you know, I started doing heart math after you introduced me to heart math. And actually what you realize as humans is we are very, very lazy breathers. Like, we kind of just breathe enough to get by, but we don't provide our body with enough oxygen to really excel. And that's from years of lazy habits. Whereas if that's the thing that you're taught, you know, first and foremost as a foundation of what you do, then I just think you set yourself up really well.
Yeah, you know what it is, Ali, with me and heart math and this whole concept, which is quite philosophical, and some people go, "Wow, these guys just got really deep really quick." It just allows more engagement. Instead of me walking around in the world like that, then actually when I do that a little bit, I see a little bit more, I hear a little bit more, my perceptions change a little bit, but I'm being more efficient. Because my body, my brain wants to do that. And the correlation between psychology and physiology is huge. And if you can nail that, you can carry out a technique. Anybody can hit a hockey ball. Anybody can hit a tennis ball. That's what coaches' jobs are to do. That's the technical side of things. But doing that skill in a performance environment, under a pressurized situation, that's when you need to have this complete cohesion between psychology and physiology if you're going to do it repeatedly.
Definitely, 100%.
And people will go, "Oh, well, that's not necessarily true because I've done that." And I'll go, "Yeah, that's fine. Maybe you're the exception to the rule." But generally, you have different types of people. You have different types of personality. Some people naturally have that flow and that connection and can do things at ease. Some people just need to manufacture it and work on it a little bit harder. But whatever route you take, there's a path. There's a path to where you want to be. But what you can't do is just go, "Yeah, I can't do this."
Yeah, my mindset towards it, I guess, was always linking back to sport as well. And it's kind of like, well, when I was a player, I wouldn't step out on a hockey pitch cold. I wouldn't step out on a hockey pitch not warmed up. And I guess where I'm at now versus when I first started doing a lot of this stuff is I kind of look at all this sort of stuff as my warm up for the day. So, you know, if I roll out of bed, cruise down the stairs. So I live in the school, so my office is really close to my house. So if I roll down the stairs and walk into my office straight out of bed, no warm up, no anything, I'm going to be pretty shitty. Like my performance at work is going to be so below, like horrible. Whereas if I get up and I kind of think about it, like, why do you warm up in sport? To prepare your mind and your body to perform. So if I can get up before work and prepare my mind and prepare my body for that environment, then, you know, my productivity levels go through the roof. The way I deliver.
We've talked about this a lot, haven't we? The fact is that, how do you expect your players to be on their A game if you're not?
Oh, massive. And I think this is where we don't mean to be like this as coaches, but we can be very hypocritical. And I think we spend so much time, and I think the environment creates that, because I think we spend so much time looking at our athletes and looking at how we can help them and looking at how every time we're with them, we can help them get that little bit better, that we're always looking outward. And I don't think we look inward enough. And I don't think we're going, well, hang on, how do I get better? So, you know, I'm telling this kid's not coping with pressure, and I'm telling him that he needs to dedicate and commit to being able to switch off and relax. Yet I'm doing nothing about being able to switch off and relax. Like that's hypocritical.
Yeah, you haven't shaved for like weeks. Your hair's stuck on end. You're back.
Yeah, which actually, to be fair, is usually me.
You're kneeling the coffee down. You're like, just relax, relax.
Probably the cleanest I've been in ages, but that's a constraint of the lockdown. With no, I was getting a bit sick of my hair being so long, and I couldn't go to a hairdresser, so I shaved it off.
Yeah,
but
me too.
But yeah, it's a fascinating one. I don't, you know, I don't think we intentionally aim to be like that. I just think that the way that the coaching environment is it's very much looking outwards of, okay, how do I help that person? Where do we get better here? And how do we do this? And I just think there's a quote I read the other day, and it was something like, if you want to fix the world, start by fixing yourself. You know, and if you want things to change and if you want to help people and develop, you've got to focus that on you first, and then you're in a position where you can actually genuinely help. Like, if I don't know how to switch off and if I don't know how to relax myself, well, how can I tell someone else, go and learn to relax yourself? If I haven't learned to do it, well, I can't just assume that it's that easy for someone else to go and do it.
I used to phrase it one of the Zoom online conferences that I was running earlier in the week with a group. And the phrase was as simple as, until the need to change becomes greater than the need to stay the same, behavior doesn't change. So
yeah.
Basically, it's dead easy for me to turn around and go, yeah, I need to eat better to be healthier. I need to exercise more to lose some weight. I need to breathe in order to mentally connect a little bit more. That's great. That's knowledge. But actually, do I really want that? And behavior will only change when my need to change is greater than my need to stay the same. So there has to be a why behind that and sits behind that in order for us to do it. And I think we play with that a little bit. We all know. So the world of psychology and the world of life coaching and whatever you want to call it, there's no real hidden kind of gems. There's all the education is out there. Eat better, make you be healthier. Don't drink so much, help your liver out a little bit. Don't eat too many kebabs, lose a little bit of weight. And breathe, relax. Have quite good sleeping patterns. All of these things are out there. Why don't we choose to do them on a regular basis? One, because they're not habitual. Two, because actually that need to change is not greater than the need to stay the same.
I think the habitual thing's huge. I think I've definitely dabbled in this for a long period of time. And if you'd asked me a year ago, I wouldn't have said I was dabbling. I would have said I was really into it. But actually, I've probably realized now that I've just been dabbling, because I would do things and I would do it fairly consistently, but there wouldn't necessarily be a structure about it. I would kind of do it. And what I found with that, because God, I'm nowhere near perfect with this sort of stuff, is that it's very, very easy to have good habits when things are good. It's very, very easy to achieve something when you're motivated. It's really bloody hard to do that when you're not motivated or when you're in a bad place. Especially our personality type. So, generally we like to be around people. We get our energy from being around people. We're really bubbly. We like to motivate. That's the kind of, we're pretty driven. That's the kind of people we are. But on a bad day, we're the opposite of that. So actually, I'm not driven. I don't want to be around people. And having that awareness is really important. But it's very, very difficult if you're in that place to then go, oh, well, I'll just go off and do some breathing for a bit. Whereas, I've been doing a lot of reading in this period of time, which has been great, because I've definitely realized I haven't allocated enough time to that. And we're in a position where we have time. So as I say, it's easy to do these things when you can. But one of the things I've been reading about is creating good habits. And, the book I've been reading is called Atomic Habits. Honestly, unbelievable. And it sounds really corny, but it's actually one of those life-changing books. You read the first 10 pages and you go, oh my God. And you just can't stop reading. Yeah, you just can't stop reading it. It's unbelievable. But I think where I've got to in the last month now, and this is how new it is in this part of the journey, is that I have realized that, we can talk about some of the challenges I've done, but generally they've been quite ad hoc, as in if I've been doing a running challenge, there's been a daily limit that I need to run or something like that. But there's never been at a time or at a certain place or anything like that. And so, as I say, it's really easy when you're motivated to do your 5Ks a day. But when it's cold and wet outside and it's not part of a specific routine in your day, you start to slip.
Yeah.
Whereas when you build these routines that are quite structured and quite specific, well, I think that it takes you from like a fair weather dabbler kind of person into a almost part of your identity and who you are. And so that's been a really cool part of the last month, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And one of the things that we'll share on the download PDF is maybe some ways of working out your habits as well. And I've got some morning habits, and I've got some evening habits, and I've got some check-ins during the day just to remind myself of some things.
How do you do your check-ins?
On my check-ins, I use a phone. I literally use my phone. So I look at my day in the morning, and I'll schedule some time slots during the day that my phone goes off and just sends me a little text message kind of stuff. Or either, it depends on if I'm at home, I'll get Alexa to do it, and just gives me my little cue. I need a cue. And I'm a visual person. And if I haven't got a visual cue, I need something else to just kind of go, oh, there you go.
But that's the first part of a habit, though, isn't it? The cue. Like if you break a habit down into 4 parts, the first part is the cue. And you have to, if it's something that you don't naturally do, you're not going to go looking for it. So you have to create an environmental cue that's going to trigger that. So exactly what you're saying, whether it's a reminder on your phone, for me, part of my routine is it's quite structured in the morning, but at a certain point before I go for a run, I have a drink. But actually, to make that a part of my routine, straight after that, I get in the car and I drive somewhere and go for a run. So what I do is I leave my car keys next to my drink bottle.
Nice.
And the reason is when I get to that point where I'm about to go for a run, I see the car keys, then I see the bottle next to it. And the bottle being there is the cue that I need to have a drink before I go for a run.
And that's why, 1, you need to know your personality traits. 2, you need to know your learning styles, because if you're a visual learner, then there's your visual cue. If you're not, you need to find a better cue for you in terms of that hits your personality traits. Yeah, my morning ones are, and I've listened to and I've read Atomic Habits and a load of other work over the last sort of 20, 30 years on habits. And they're a little bit idealistic at times. So you have to understand that we all live in real world. So my real world is the fact that actually I have a 6-year-old who's probably jumping on my head in the morning. That might slightly affect my habits. So what I've done is I've given myself contingencies B and C based on this is my A habit. So my A habit is what I'd like to do is get up on a morning. I'd like to go and do 30 minutes of exercise. And then I'd like to do 15 minutes of a podcast in terms of a walk and a cool down. Priority A, there's my on a good day, that's what I'm doing. Yeah. If that's not possible because I have a 6-year-old jumping on my head, well, actually, maybe my next go-to is I miss out my 30 minutes of exercise, but I do my 15 minutes walk in the garden podcast. Great. So I'm still getting that a little bit. If that's not possible, then actually the next stage is I'll get up, I'll do 10 press-ups, I'll do 10 sit-ups, I'll do 10 squats, I'll jump in the shower and play the podcast in the shower. So my habits, I'm still getting what I want out of that start of the day, but actually there's a correlation between ideal world and real world that has to fit in there.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And I think it probably comes back to principles of what you're trying to achieve in the morning, doesn't it? Yeah. So for me, my morning routine's quite long at the moment because I have the time to do that. But that doesn't really worry me from the perspective of when things get a little bit more hectic again, because I know the principles of what I'm doing. So if I can't spend 30 minutes on one thing, but I can still spend 10 minutes, then I'm still achieving the same principle. So for me, my morning habit is kind of broken up into, I guess, 3 parts really. And it's all about making sure that when I start the day, so I don't kind of count this as starting the day. I kind of include this as preparing to start the day.
Yeah.
So the first thing I do is I get up, I turn my alarm off. I then go and do some breathing exercises, which I've been doing Wim Hof breathing exercises for about a month. And I guess the overarching principle of that is you're flooding your body with oxygen. That's kind of the premise of what you're doing. So if I do that properly, that takes me half an hour because I'll do like 5 sets of it. But I'm not worried that if I knew that I had to cut my morning routine to say half an hour, well, I could do 1 set of it. Now, it may not be the optimum, but it's still the same principle that I'm trying to flood my body with oxygen to prepare me. The second part is I go for a run, and that's all about preparing my body for the day and loosening up and, you know, getting the good chemicals going and that kind of thing. And then the third part, when I come back after I've had a shower and all that kind of thing, is I do heart math for sort of 5-10 minutes. And that's the last thing I do before I kickstart the day. And that's I guess, just settling your mind and just settling everything and being quite still. So then when you start, you're in a controlled place, you're very still, you're very calm, you're very perceptive. And they're kind of the 3 principles to my morning structure. And just like you're saying, if for whatever reason I can't allocate the time that I'm allocating at the moment, if I can achieve those 3 principles in some capacity, then I'm still going to start the day a hell of a lot better than if I just roll out of bed and go down to work.
Absolutely. And I think when you said it as principles like that, Ali, and I really love that whole concept. And if I look back over the last 400 years that I've probably been alive, the times that I haven't been as effective as a person is the times when I thought I need to run 30 minutes on a morning and it hasn't been possible. So therefore the whole day I'm kind of giving myself a little bit of grief and a little bit of negativity that I haven't done it. That carries over the next day. And then all of a sudden it's 6 months and I haven't even ran because of that one day because I missed. But actually my principles are on the day. I need to breathe a little bit. I need to have a little bit of physical exercise. I need to try to connect my psychology, my physiology, but I also need to add a little bit of learning to stimulate my cognitive thought process on that day.
Yeah, that's happened to me. That's happened to me on a few of my sort of yearly challenges as well, where I've kind of, and I don't know if this was in Atomic Habits or the Compound Effect, but it's talking about never missing twice. Yeah. So you can stuff up one day, but the difference between successful people and average people is average people stuff up one day and then they go, well, I've stuffed it now. Yeah. And then they miss day 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6. Whereas successful people make the same mistakes. You know, we all make mistakes. We all stuff up. But actually, they don't tend to miss twice. It'll be, oh, well, I got that wrong yesterday, but I will not get that wrong today. And I think that's definitely something I've learned in the last couple of years, probably in the last year, is that if you don't have a principle behind it, what you're actually trying to achieve, and if you don't have the habits in place to keep you on track, and I guess the cues and the triggers to keep you on track, then you can very easily go from doing something exceptionally well for a long period of time and then just go and fall off a cliff.
And that's what happens with the majority of the world on the 31st of January every year.
Yeah.
Actually,
it's so funny, isn't it? When you think about like a New Year's resolution, and that's, you know, it started as a bit of a challenge with a mate. We stopped eating hot chips. What do you call them again here? Fries. Yeah. We stopped eating fries for a hockey season. And then it was like, oh, I'll do it as a New Year's resolution. Like, why do we wait until the 1st of January to start? Like, I know it's a new year and I get that. It's like, I think we like things like it's the start of a new week. It's the start of a new day. It's the start of a new year. It's clean.
Yeah.
But you know what? Why? It's quite a funny thing, isn't it? And then when that point ends, so say, you know, let's say you're doing dry January, which you're obviously very accustomed to. What do you do on the 1st of February? You go straight to the bloody pub.
Straight to the pub, yeah.
You go straight to the pub and you get back into it because it's like, oh, well, I've done that. That's all good now. Let's go.
Yeah. Do you know why that is though? Because generally the need to stay the same is actually greater than the need to change. So
and that probably ties into identity a little bit.
Absolutely. If you want to give up drink forever because either you've got a drinking issue or you want to be a little bit healthier or you maybe want to change the environment that you want to be around, you want to give up drink full time. Giving it up for a month is certainly it's a psychological challenge. It's certainly a bit of an ego challenge as well, because actually you don't want people to think you can't do it, so your ego comes out to play a little bit. But again, it's something which just doesn't make any sense because it's not a behavioral change. It's not a lifestyle change. It's a bit of a fad. And people do that all the time. They kind of go, oh, yeah, I'm going to go to the gym and get fit. Well, no, you're not. You're going to go to the gym for a month. You're going to lose a little bit of weight. And then actually for the other 11 months of the year, you're not going to bother. So until you want to be lifestyle fit, or you want to be mentally tuned in, or you want to learn to breathe properly to be more effective, that's a lifestyle behavioral change that needs constant work and development.
Yeah, and I think probably the most interesting thing I found about Atomic Habits, the book, and what I've kind of grabbed from it that I think is so applicable to any aspect of what you do, and it's about the identity. So, so many people, what you do is you set this goal, and it's like, this goal is up here. I want to get fit. And then generally, quite often, our behaviors don't necessarily align to that. And it doesn't really necessarily affect our identity because we're thinking about the goal. We're not thinking about who we are. Whereas rather than thinking, I want to get fit, I kind of want to create that identity that I am a runner. Because if I start telling myself, well, I'm a runner, then, well, runners run.
Yeah.
And then the byproduct of running is that I'm going to get fitter. But if I just set this goal of I want to get fit, well, how fit is fit? What does that look like? How does it mean? What are the processes? What if I can't be bothered? Whereas if I identify with being a runner, well, I've got to go and run because those are the behaviors and the processes of what a runner does. If I, with anything really, as soon as you can identify as something, then that's where I think behavior change happens. It's interesting you're talking about, having a few beers and stuff like that. Like that's more identifying with, well, yeah, I'm a drinker. I have a few beers. Whereas if you're trying to stop drinking, let's say you want to cut it all together because you have to. Well, I think the way to achieve that is to identify with not being a drinker. Yeah, I don't drink. I'm not a drinker. And then actually the flow and effect is the behaviors that come with that. And then the outcome of, well, I'm not drinking anymore is probably easier achieved.
And then that's where ego comes in again. That's where environment comes in. We're comfortable being in a pub environment. Well, actually, what happens in a pub? Everybody drinks alcohol. Or the majority of people drink alcohol. So therefore, I feel now uncomfortable being in that environment, not drinking. So yeah, there's a load of stuff around my conscious, my subconscious, my ego, my identity, my habits, all come to what you're identifying. What we're talking about here is your philosophy as an individual person. And I just want to kind of ask you one more question, otherwise, because we could just literally, as high eyes, have this conversation forever. With all of that, because people turn around and go, well, Ali and Graham have not talked anything about coaching and philosophy. And for me, this whole conversation is about coaching and philosophy. But for those people who haven't necessarily joined the dots yet or put the pieces of the jigsaw puzzle together, how does all of this correlate together for you to actually implement what you do on the hockey pitch?
Very interesting question. Very deep question. So I think first and foremost it comes back to what we're talking about. If you want your athletes to perform at their best, as a coach, you need to be performing at your best. And I think athletes can see straight through that. Like if you're not in a great place, if you're stressed or you're cranky or whatever, like, you think of when you were playing, you kind of, the time when your coach walks in, you just go, oh shit, he's not in a great place. Here we go. So I think preparing inwardly helps you prepare outwardly. So I think that's a really important thing. And I guess I have tried to approach, like I said, that with the same that I would as a player. So I focus on my preparation to make sure I can perform at its best. And then for me, because I think I'm very, very aware of people's personality types, and I'm very, very aware of my own. And because of that, you know, I guess my general philosophy is people perform at their best when they're confident. That's the overarching principle. So your job is to try and help people become confident. And so I think having that self-awareness helps that. And I think just having that awareness and understanding of people, and that probably comes down to the personality type of liking to be around people. So then you're around different types of people more often. So then you gain those skills and that knowledge of how to interact. So I think it's a skill that comes out of a curiosity of wanting to be around people. But yeah, I think if I break down coaching into, you know, everyone loves talking about what their coaching philosophy is and all that kind of stuff. But if I really break it down to one key thing is, you know, I just believe that we perform at our best when we're confident. And I know I spent large parts of my career not confident. And I know I didn't perform my best. So it probably comes out of that. So yeah, you know, I guess you've sort of worked with me and seen me work a bit. I would spend more time in a warm-up, walking around the pitch, putting my arm around someone's shoulder, or having a joke, or having a dig to get that individual person in the right place. Like, if it was a real competitive person, I'd go up to them and go, bet you can't score 3 today. And I know that they'd go out and try and prove me wrong. If it's someone who needs to relax, I'd put my arm around them and have a joke, and nothing to do about hockey, whatever. So I think how this all correlates into coaching is that I'm trying to always get my athletes in the best place for them. And when they do that, performance takes care of itself.
I just want to flick you back a little bit before we finish as well, because I love that. And that's exactly what we've talked about before, and we've worked on quite a lot as well. And I think all coaches do that. I think all coaches who don't even do anything on personality profiling, who do nothing on emotional intelligence, will identify the players who need to be relaxed to put their arm around the shoulder. Those who need to be challenged in terms of driven need to be given a little bit of a kind of a goal to set during the match. And I 100% agree that every coach has that when they're on their A game. I think when the pressure comes, the anxiety comes, it's the final game, it's a must-win game. I think they don't do that.
Yeah, and I also, like, I know there's been times in the last few years where I've forgotten that that's what I believe in, because I've probably got so caught up in tactics or I don't know, outcomes, you name it, like you pile more and more stuff on, and actually there's definitely been times where I've forgotten about that.
Yeah.
And I know I haven't got the best out of my athletes, and I know I haven't.
We're still learning. We're still growing.
And I know I haven't achieved that because I've gotten away from the foundation that I believe in, which is that you know, you're trying to prepare your athletes to be confident so they can perform when it matters.
Ali, what a brilliant sentence to finish on. If everybody wants to subscribe, we will pull together a little PDF.
Are we done? I could keep going on this for hours.
I know that we can do some activities from that. So make sure you share, make sure you subscribe. And Ali, thank you very much for your time. It's always a pleasure, mate.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me on.